Calvin Russell committing to Syracuse football has completely changed the perception of this program for the better.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are discussing more about the ripple effect of five-star wide receiver Calvin Russell verbally committing to Syracuse football on Saturday night. And later on in this podcast, we're going to go over the long-term potential this has for Syracuse football in potentially the class of 2027 recruiting and beyond that. We're also going to discuss the short-term impact this has. I mean, after all, Calvin Russell is going to be playing for Syracuse football. He could be a day one contributor for this team in 2026. And who knows? This commitment might help a certain four-star defensive back potentially flip to Syracuse football in 2026. We'll talk about that later on in the show. But first, we're going to discuss how the perception of Syracuse football nationally has completely changed for the better with this announcement of Calvin Russell committing to Fran Brown and Syracuse. The early signs were there. They were. Fran Brown, he took over as Syracuse's head coach in late November of 2023. And right off the bat, his first recruiting class, the class of 2024, he gets it to 37th in the country on 24/7 Sports. 24/7 Sports began tracking class team rankings in 2003, and Syracuse having the 37th best class in the nation was the highest it had ever been on 24/7 Sports since 2003 when they began tracking it. In 2025, the second recruiting class of the Fran Brown era, he gets a four-star recruit, consensus four-star recruit, I might add, from Florida, flips him from the Florida Gators, Demetrius Samuel Jr. The class overall, though, takes a little bit of a step back, but not too much. It was 43rd in the nation as opposed to 37th. But now in 2026, they really make their first big-time statement on the recruiting trail. Syracuse landing Calvin Russell means they are no longer a quote-unquote pushover school. If you're a program and you're going head-to-head against Syracuse football in recruiting, doesn't matter the recruit now. You can lose. You can lose to Syracuse. There used to be excuses as to why Syracuse couldn't land elite recruits. And for the most part, they're gone now because they just got an elite recruit and a guy like Calvin Russell who was coveted by pretty much every school around the nation. And we're going to get to that in just a moment here. I want to discuss how Calvin Russell actually committed to Syracuse in one of the most shocking fashions that you will find. Let me explain here, okay? He did not take an official visit with this program. I had on Locked On recruiting expert and Portal podcast host Brian Smith on this podcast on Sunday night, and I asked him about it. And he said it is extremely rare for an elite recruit to commit to a program without taking an official visit to that program. And he said in those rare moments where that does occur, because it's not completely unheard of, it has happened, there's precedent. He said it's usually with in-state kids, guys who don't need to take official visits. For example, you could be from Coral Gables, Florida, and you're located 5 minutes from Miami's campus. why bother taking an official visit? You've probably been there your whole life, right? That's usually when it happens. Calvin Russell is from South Florida, not from Syracuse. He never once took an official visit. He did unofficially visit 4 times over the past year, but during this summer, it's incredible. He took official visits to Florida, LSU, Oregon, Miami, Florida State, and Michigan per 24/7 Sports. He had offers from programs like Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, USC. Name the school, they probably at least offered Calvin Russell because he's a top 5 wide receiver in the nation. This is one of the best players overall in the country here. And yet Syracuse landed him without getting him on campus for an official visit. Practically unheard of. And it's also one of the reasons why I believe that this commitment will last. I guess the elephant in the room this whole time has been, hey, there's a long time between now and signing day. Signing day isn't until early December. And verbal commitments at the end of the day are just verbal commitments. There's no pen to paper. He can flip. I know what he has said. I'm taking his word for it, but until there's pen to paper, there's always that outside shot. But the fact that he never took an official visit to Syracuse and still committed to him verbally, it makes me pretty confident that this is a commitment that is going to last and that they are ultimately going to sign it. So that's number one. The perception of this program has changed because not only did they get Calvin Russell, they got Calvin Russell without ever officially getting him on campus for a visit, official visit, I should say. The other thing is Syracuse showed that they can open up the checkbook too. That's right, folks. Everyone's favorite conversation, money. Obviously, I am not going to discount the relationship that Fran Brown and Calvin Russell developed because I think that's ultimately won out in the end. I think that's why Calvin Russell chose Syracuse. He has all the faith in the world in head coach Fran Brown. But make no mistake, if you want to sit at the big boy table with some of the elite recruits in the nation, you better come with the cash. Now, I want to be clear. I don't know how much Syracuse gave Calvin Russell or how much they promised Calvin Russell. I got no clue. I see the rumors online. They are just rumors to me. There's no confirmed reporting on it. I am taking those rumors with 8,000 buckets of salt, if you will. I'm basically saying I don't believe him for a second. I haven't seen any credible report. I have no idea what they actually gave him, but you have to kind of figure that if you're going to be in on the race for Calvin Russell, you got to be financially competitive. I don't know if Calvin Russell took the most money. I don't know how much money was really a factor. I don't know if he left money on the table. But what I do know is that you're not getting an elite recruit if you can't open up the checkbook. Because if you can't do it, another school is going to be able to do it. Think about his top 4. Yes, Syracuse was in there, but Michigan was the runner-up. You know, the same school that ponied up the most NIL money to land the number 1 recruit in the nation last year in Bryce Underwood? Yeah, that one. Oregon, hello. Florida State, massive NIL money in those programs. And Syracuse not only had a seat at the table, they won. So the excuse of, they don't have money, that's out the window. The perception of Syracuse has changed. You know you're doing something right when there are people online complaining how much or may have Syracuse offered a guy. I don't know how much they offered him, but you know what? They definitely ponied up. That's for sure. So overall, schools around the country have to look at Syracuse differently on the recruiting trail. They can't go into a battle with Syracuse in recruiting and say, I'm just going to pick a random school. We're the University of Georgia. We send guys to the NFL every year. We always get elite players. We're always a really good program year in and year out. We win national titles with Kirby Smart. He's not going anywhere. We're going to win because we're Georgia and you're Syracuse. Not anymore. I'm not saying that Syracuse is going to get all of their recruiting targets that they ever have from here on out, or that they're going to consistently be able to beat out some of those elite programs. But they're no longer a pushover program. They showed by getting Calvin Russell that they can compete with the best and they can actually get them. Not only can they compete, they can beat them for elite players. And that's something that I think us as Syracuse fans always dreamed about, because it's been a long time since we have been able to say that about Syracuse football. And really up until this point, even with Fran Brown. I don't know how you felt about it, but I always wanted to see it to believe it. Again, the signs were there of what Fran Brown was doing, but we were waiting for a commitment like this, because this really puts Syracuse football on the map. They're not playing around. And when Fran Brown says his goal is to go undefeated and win a national title, he's being for real. There is no BS. He's not sitting here secretly hoping for 8-4 or 7-5. You know, that's stuff that I do and maybe we do as well. He doesn't. He doesn't at all. He has completely changed the perception of this program, not only from what he has done in his first season, right, going 9-3, 10-3, but by getting a 5-star wide receiver in Calvin Russell. How much do you think the perception of Syracuse has changed? I'd love your thoughts on this in the comments section below. Coming up, we'll talk about the short-term impact that Calvin Russell can have on Syracuse football. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. I know I felt that last week going to a New York Mets game on Thursday night. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. In fact, we got the cheapest seats on Game Time, and I saved some money. So you know what I did with that saved money? I splurged on Shake Shack over at Citi Field. So use Game Time. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB. Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting MLB game. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we're going to continue this conversation about the impact of Calvin Russell's commitment to Syracuse University. Earlier, we talked about the perception of the program has completely changed because this was a statement on the recruiting trail by Fran Brown and his staff. And we're about to talk about the short-term impact this could have for Syracuse, Russell as a player, and also the potential for the 2026 recruiting class in general. But first, just want to thank you all for continuing to like and subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all who do so are truly the best. Now, if you haven't done so already and you've already made it this far in the podcast, first of all, I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. I hope that means you enjoy the podcast. And if so, if you can just do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Now let's get back to the actual content portion of this podcast, talking about the short-term impact with Calvin Russell and Syracuse. Number one, Calvin Russell is an elite player. He's an elite recruit. 6'5", 190, probably does need to bulk up a little bit entering his senior year in high school. But this is someone who on 24/7 Sports is 21st overall as a player in the nation. A 5-star recruit, a top 5 wide receiver in the country. He's an elite player who, if you go check his bio on 24/7 Sports, you'll find that his comparison is T. Higgins. T. Higgins, for those that don't know, was a star wide receiver at Clemson who won a national title with them and is also doing quite well for himself in the NFL. I must say that if Calvin Russell becomes a guy like T. Higgins, I think we'll all be pretty pleased. I think that would be a massive success for Syracuse University. He's got great speed. He can win 50-50 battles. He can run after the catch. He is someone who can make an immediate impact on the field day one as a true freshman. Think about the potential for the wide receiver core. It's tough to do because the transfer portal is a real thing. And as we learned over this past offseason, no player is safe from the portal. I don't think many of us expected that a guy like Trevor Pena would enter the portal, but he did. It happens. It's the nature of the business that we're in now. But just hear me out. Darryl Gill, Jonte Cook, Calvin Russell in 2026. Sounds pretty good. Sounds good if you ask me. I don't know. I'm just saying. Calvin Russell, elite recruit, elite talent, can make a day one impact for Syracuse on the field. I don't know about you all, but that sounds pretty scary, especially in a Jeff Nixon offense that we just saw was the best passing attack in the country a year ago. You know what I also find funny is that a lot of these comments online about Russell and committing to Syracuse, why Syracuse? Well, did you not see their offense a year ago? I know that I'm mostly speaking to you Syracuse fans, but I just find that fascinating. But hey, now Syracuse is more on the radar when you get a guy like Calvin Russell. Pretty nice, right? Number two, the 2026 recruiting class now, which is short term because that's the upcoming recruiting class. Remember, recruiting classes are always a year ahead of the college football season. So we're entering the 2025 college football season, but we're really talking about 2026 recruiting because that's how it works. It's always a year ahead of the current season. But the 2026 recruiting class is projected to be the strongest Syracuse recruiting class in over 20 years. It's currently just outside the top 20 if you go look at the composite rankings on 24/7 Sports. If you just look at 24/7 Sports alone, though, they are inside the top 20 nationally around the nation, right? And again, it goes back to what I said about class team recruiting rankings didn't really start until 2003 on 24/7 Sports. The Orange have never even had a top 30 class in the nation on that website since they began tracking it. Not even top 30. And now we're talking about how they could potentially have a top 20 class in the nation with Calvin Russell. But by the way, I know I mentioned that the goal was top 30. Getting Calvin Russell all but ensures that that's going to happen. Assuming that he ends up signing with Syracuse in December, I'd be shocked if Syracuse fell outside the top 30 in recruiting by signing day. They're going to be a top 30 class. So already alone, that's the strongest recruiting class of the Fran Brown era and the strongest football recruiting class in over 2 decades. But it could also be top 20. Now, they currently have 26 verbal commits in the class of 2026. So I'm not sure how many players they're going to take from here on out. And something that we haven't talked about yet, because we're all so excited about Calvin Russell, Syracuse basically struck out on everyone else, but we don't really care because they got Calvin Russell. He was really the big one that mattered, but they didn't get CJ Hester, who was a 4-star defensive back. They didn't get Julius Miles or Xavier Payne, 3-star guys. They could have helped Syracuse recruiting in this class, but they didn't get them. But that's okay. We'll take the trade of getting Calvin Russell. Okay. But I wanted to point that out there. The guy that I think myself and many of you might be eyeing as a potential short-term target, someone who can help immediately the 2026 recruiting class, 4-star defensive back, current Florida State commit, Tadarius Hughes. Tadarius Hughes has taken an official visit to Syracuse, and as Brian Smith always says, if you get someone for an official visit, that alone gives you a puncher's chance at actually landing a recruit. Doesn't matter what school they are or aren't committed to. If that player says, I want to take an official visit to a school, there's some level of interest. They're giving you a shot. That's why it's always sometimes it's a little bit alarming sometimes when you have a verbal commitment and that verbal commitment's taking official visits to other places. Because you know that you're giving that school a puncher's chance of actually landing that commit. And Syracuse, they got one with Tadarius Hughes, an official visit. And on top of that, he was at the party that Calvin Russell had on Saturday night when he announced his commitment to Syracuse. He's also teammates with Calvin Russell at Miami Northwestern. Now, about the teammate thing, here's what I'll say on it. I don't think it hurts. I think it's nice. It's useful. It can't hurt. Because at the end of the day, though, how much impact does it really have of them being teammates? Tadarius Hughes has to make the decision of where he wants to go to school that is ultimately best for himself and his career in football or his career academically. So it's nice that Calvin Russell is his teammate and decided to commit to Syracuse. But I don't know how much that truly matters. I'll just say it can't hurt. It can't hurt that the guys appear to be really good friends. It can't hurt that they're teammates either. So who knows? Maybe Syracuse can flip a guy like Tadarius Hughes. And if they get a guy like Tadarius Hughes, a 4-star defensive back, borderline top 300 player in the country, that alone could give them a top 20 class right there. So overall, Calvin Russell in the short term, he projects as someone who can immediately help Syracuse on the field, and off the field, he could probably help Syracuse at least a little bit in the class of 2026 when it comes to recruiting other players. Maybe a guy like Tadarius Hughes decides to flip over to Syracuse now that his teammate is playing for Syracuse. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think the short-term impact this has for the university? Comment in the comments section below, because coming up, we'll talk about the long-term potential with Calvin Russell and Syracuse. So stick with me here on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Let's get to the long-term impact of Calvin Russell choosing to verbally commit to Syracuse University on Saturday night, giving Syracuse its first 5-star recruit in over 2 decades. We discussed the short-term impact, Calvin Russell as an immediate day one contributor, right? And how he might be able to help in 2026 recruiting with a guy like Tadarius Hughes, his friend and teammate, potentially flipping from Florida State to Syracuse. But I think where we're really going to see the effect of Calvin Russell is in the long term. Forget him as a player for just a moment, because who knows how he's going to shape out. But in recruiting, this is really going to help 2027, 2028, and beyond that. This is where I feel like this is going to have the highest impact. Because again, class of 2026, they already have 26 guys. 2027, we'll get to it in just a moment. They only have 4. Shouldn't say only have 4, but they have 4 guys. So there's plenty of more players that they can take in the class of 2027. As Brian Smith noted on Sunday night, everyone knows who Calvin Russell is, particularly if you're from South Florida. You know Calvin Russell. You know the high school, Miami Northwestern. It's a powerhouse program. The head coach of that program is Teddy Bridgewater, former Louisville quarterback, played in the National Football League for many years. Pretty successful football guy, Teddy Bridgewater. He's the head coach at Miami Northwestern. Year in and year out, they produce elite college football players and guys who will go on and play on Sundays. So people in that area and around the country know Calvin Russell because he's one of the best players there. He's a borderline top 20 player overall in the nation, one of the 5 best players in the state of Florida in general. They know who Calvin Russell is. And why do I keep saying that? Because Calvin Russell chose Syracuse. And so now, if you're an elite player and you see someone of Calvin Russell's caliber commit to Syracuse, you got to start thinking why. Why would Calvin Russell do it? Why did he choose Syracuse over any program? Why would he do it? And because that seed is planted, because that question is planted in people's heads now, because they have to be thinking about it, it's a pretty big deal. It's not normal for Syracuse to go out and get a guy like him. It's normal for Georgia, where Southeast programs or even big time up north programs to go into Florida and get these type of players. Ohio State goes out and gets Jeremiah Smith from South Florida a couple of years ago. Right? Syracuse, not normal. But now you got to think about them. If you were a recruit and you had an offer from Syracuse, but you never were taking them seriously, well, now you kind of have to at least a little bit. You got to at least hear him out. Because Calvin Russell committed there. What's Calvin Russell see in Syracuse that maybe other recruits don't see? Maybe you should check it out. Or maybe you were a little bit further along. Maybe you are kind of checking out Syracuse a little bit, but you're still feeling out other offers because you're a Division I potential player, so you're going to have other offers. Now you really got to be taking them more seriously. Maybe I got to get to campus for a visit or multiple visits or speak to Fran Brown and the staff more. Because when you get a guy like Calvin Russell, it makes other players start to question, why would he come there? And should I consider them? And that effect that it could have is you can end up getting more. It becomes a domino effect because I don't think Calvin Russell is the last 5-star player to commit to Syracuse in the Fran Brown era. Now, as Syracuse fans, when the Orange offer an elite player, we're going to believe that Syracuse has a chance because we know that that player should probably take Syracuse seriously. You get Calvin Russell, that's a big deal. You should consider Syracuse at that point. So what's the projection now? Well, I think it's a reasonable expectation that in the class of 2027, that they finish with a top 20 class in the nation. Why not? They might finish top 20 in 2026. I expect them now to have a top 20 class in 2027 and beyond that. And the best place to be, as Rex Ryan says, the best place to be is when the expectations are high. Fran Brown and this staff have earned high expectations now in recruiting. Why not a top 20 class in 2027? Maybe even better than that. If you look at their current commits right now in 2027, they have 4 of them. It's a long time between now and signing day. But they're all pretty good recruits. Stanley Montgomery is a top 40 defensive lineman in the country. Travis Miles is a top 40 safety in the country. Tank White is a top 40 athlete in the country. And Justin Dixon is a top 50 quarterback in the country. I know that if you check 24/7 Sports, they're all 3 stars or not rated. But if you go look at where they rank positionally, these are guys who are not far off from being 4 stars. If they have good junior years, they're going to be named 4-star recruits. Make no mistake, Calvin Russell may have been the first 5-star to commit in the Fran Brown era, but I do not think he will be the last. With that being said, tomorrow and Thursday on this podcast, unless there's big breaking news, we'll probably go back to Syracuse football position previews. Sound good to everyone? And then on Friday, we could talk more about Syracuse football recruiting on Poll Friday, where we think now the class of 2026 will end up because they got Calvin Russell. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you could check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape and find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. And if you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe and tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all again soon.